This lesson that we will have today is related with the process of communication in the spirit of prophecy. Sister White emphasized and described very often not only the method or the way that the Lord has chosen to transfer to her specific information, but also the content. Very often she related with the way how the message was given. And we wish to consider this today. In letter 53 says, I had not the least idea of writing as I have done, but the Lord has carried my mind on and on until you have the matter I sent. This gives us one of the first attributes of this communication that is related with the inspiration in the transferring of this message. Because she received a message from the Lord, can be through vision or through dreams or through a oral communication in conscious form when she was writing something or praying. But this can be giving this message in different steps that were absolutely unknown to the prophetess. This means that the prophetess or the prophet used the vocabulary that the person possesses or have, but don't have control about the things that the person write down. For example, we have considered Daniel. Yesterday we have analyzed the example about the vision of the ram and the goat. The explanation was given to him after another vision was introduced between this first one and the explanation of this. So we find first the ram and the goat, then we find one Bible text that is Daniel 8:14 about the 2,300 evenings and mornings. After this came the explanation for the first vision. In the next chapter came the explanation for the second vision that was without explanation in chapter 8. So he didn't have any control about the way how the Lord presented the information. Because according to human way of thinking, if somebody tells you something and you don't understand, you hope to receive immediately the answer or the explanation for it. And that was the wish also of Daniel, but was not the case. He received only the explanation for the first vision, and after a time, he received also from the second vision. So the prophet don't have control about the way, the method, and the content of the information. And also if it's again his own way of thinking, because the beginning of chapter 9 of Daniel allow us to come to the conclusion that he was confused about this numerical prophecy because he was aware about the fulfillment of the other numerical prophecy of Jeremiah about the 70 years. So he was confused and concerned about the meaning and the understanding of it. In this case, Sister White says, I had not the least idea of writing as I have done, but the Lord has carried my mind on and on until you have the matter I sent. And this is another element of divine guidance, that the spirit of prophecy cannot be bound by the way of thinking, of dealing with things that we have as human beings, when a prophet is submitted to the will of God, as in this case was. Let us see another example in letter 52. I am now sitting on my couch with my pen in hand, writing. Ideas come clear and distinct, and very forcibly. I thank the Lord with heart and soul and voice. So she was doing something, she was writing, and ideas came to her. That was not a vision, that was not a dream, that was a direct inspiration related with the action that she was performing, and was related with this. Because very often we find that Sister White received a vision, and afterwards she didn't know how to describe it, what kind of words to use to describe this what she saw or this what she have here. And she went through hard times to be able to communicate this. But now the Lord came to her and give clear ideas in order to be able to summarize or to describe with the proper concept that what the Lord has given to her. So in this process of communication is not only the vision or the dream, but also the process of inspiration is included in this moment when the message is given. Let me present it to you in a graphic. So we have here the person, and we have God, and it's a message that God wished to communicate to a person in order to give to the people of God. Now, let us suppose that the Lord used the method of a dream. So this is the method, the way, how he is going to give the information. We know that how the idea of God through this dream came to the person is through inspiration. So, now, the message is already given. So the person received the message. Now, the person now, this is our first step. Now we go to the second step, because this person that received the dream, that was the information given from God to him or her to give to the people of God, is giving. This is fulfilled, the first step. Now, this person needs to transfer this dream and the content of this dream to the people of God. Now, again, can be in oral, can be in writing. Now, the way how this communication of God become as humanized message that become human is also through inspiration again, but is presented in human words. So in both steps, God to the person and the person to the people of God, inspiration is included in it. To receive it, and to impart it. In both cases, the inspiration is included in the process, as we see here from Sister White. And we see this also in an example of Jeremiah. Jeremiah received a message from the Lord to communicate to the people of God. He was not able to go personally to the temple or to the leaders of the people of God and present it to them. So he dictated in oral form to Baruch. This process of communicating the message to another person, and this person needed to write down, is again a process of inspiration. Because Jeremiah was the only one that saw the vision or received the message. Now, in this moment, the human element is a passive element, because the human element only receives the information. Now, in the moment that the human being become an active element is when the human being needs to transfer this originally message to other people. And also in this process, the Lord don't allow that the person take themselves the freedom to say whatever they want. So the Lord also introduced the presence of the Holy Spirit in the transferring from human to human this originally divine message. So in the both sections of the process, the Holy Spirit is present and the inspiration is present. Let us consider other elements. Wrote in 1890, manuscript 22. Before I stand on my feet, I have no thought of speaking as plainly as I do, but the Spirit of God rests upon me with power, and I cannot but speak the words given me. I dare not withhold one word of the testimony. I speak the words given me by a power higher than human power, and I cannot, if I will, recall one sentence. In the night season, the Lord gives me instruction in symbols and then explains their meaning. He gives me the word, and I dare not refuse to give it to the people. The love of Christ, and I venture to add, the love of souls constrain me, and I cannot hold my peace. So another element to be added to this structure. So the messenger receives the word of the Lord, need to present it to the people, and when the person is faithful to the Lord and wish to do what the Lord says, cannot do in another way. Cannot add it, cannot subtract to the message, but give the message as it is. But also in the process of this transmission of information from human to human, here say, very interesting, the Spirit of God rested upon me with power, and I cannot speak the words given me. I cannot but speak the words given me. So she was not also with the faculty to decide what kind of words to use. The Lord gave to her first the information, and now the vocabulary, the way of expressions needed to transfer also this information. And this is another element, because we know that Sister White especially, she was very afraid to give a testimony or present a vision that was not included good news or good information about the person or the leaders. And I think every one of us will be in the same situation. If you need to speak and admonish somebody, you are not rejoicing because of doing this. This is a difficult matter, and you pray to the Lord to prepare also the heart of the people. And especially when General Conference took place in the time of Sister White, generally always the Lord gave messages to her about things that were not going properly. So she was afraid to give the message, but she said, I was not able to change anything. So I needed to give it as was given to me. And this is important that we consider in the transferring of the information. It's another element that concern always the human element of the transmission of information, and is summarized in letter 59 from 1895. When I have written one testimony to the brethren, I have thought that I should not have any more to write. But again, I am in travail of soul, and cannot sleep or rest. In the night season, I am speaking and writing clear words of admonition. I waken so burdened in soul that I am again driven to take up my pen. In various ways, matters are opened up before my mind, and I dare not rest or keep quiet. So this means that not always could she feel free from the responsibility of the message, even after she had transmitted it. One specific case is in 1888. She presented the message. We know the results. The majority don't accept the message. And afterwards, also Jones, Waggoner presented further on in different churches. And she needed again to emphasize the importance of this message and how the leadership of the church took the wrong decision at this time. And that was a burden to her. So don't mean that a prophet received a message, give the message, and it is done. We find in the Bible again and again the repetition of messages in different circumstances according to the situation and the events, but very similar messages even from the same people. Jeremiah is a specific case. She repeated before the first deportation, you need to be submitted to the Babylonian. When the first deportation came, he announced, you see, please be faithful, fulfill the promise that you have given to the king of Babylon to be faithful. Otherwise, you will be deported the second time. So they again rebel against the king. So again, Jeremiah repeated the same. And he went on repeating and repeating all the time. And the Bible is a repetition of God to us in different ways, in different circumstances, in order that we come back to the original path. And that's happened very often in the case of Sister White. And therefore, the principles of the hermeneutic in the Bible, in order to have the completely picture, you need to add all the information that belonged to the same subject that was given from the Lord in different times and different circumstances to different people in order to have the completely picture. And the connection between the Old Testament and the New Testament is the principle that fulfills this same idea. All the truth of the sanctuary explained now in the new dispensation. It's the same truth, but in two different perspectives. So the prophet can receive additional elements to the same message. One typical example is the health reform in the testimonies. When you consider how the message was given step by step, all of them, all the pioneers, were eating meat at the beginning. And a process came and they received the message step by step. First of all, which kind of meat was presented as extremely dangerous for the health? Do you remember? Pork. That was the first, yes. Was presented, one of the first visions was about tobacco and coffee and pork. So, and don't finish there, the health reform. The subject was the same. After came hygiene regulations, how to ventilate the house, how to clean the house, how to clean the body, how to prepare the food correctly, how to combine the nutritional elements in the food correctly. Then came the abstention also of different fats. Then came also the specific element of avoiding any kind of meat. And then you find one sentence only in councils of for food, diets and foods that say, don't make food eating a proof of fellowship. It's only this sentence. So, if you don't consider the evolution of the message of the health reform that was given step by step, The subject is the same all the time, but was amplified and was added to it, and more information, in more ways, and more messages given to the Lord. Then you come to this last statement and say, here is saying, you cannot do this. We will study this specific subject. And the problem is that all the message is not considered according to the additions of the same subject that was given. So this element in the spirit of prophecy is extremely important. It's the same example when you go to Daniel 8 and you see about the ram and the goat vision. And this ram and goat vision, the goat have one horn first. Who was this first horn? No, the goat was Greece. Yeah. This prominent horn, the first one that came out and destroyed the ram, with all the power go against the ram and destroy him. Who was this?
Alexander the Great.
Alexander the Great. Medo-Persia was the ram. This is correct. Then, this horn was destroyed. Then came 4. Which were these 4?
4 generals.
That the empire was divided. And now the vision say that another came among them, a little one, okay? And give the description of this other one that came among them. And then came the vision of verse 14 about the 2,300 evening and mornings, and then go on as the desolation of the sanctuary will come. The Protestant church have an explanation of this other and say that is Antiochus Epiphanes. In this way, the completely doctrine of the sanctuary is destroyed, because then it's not relationship between the heavenly sanctuary, the revelation received by Daniel in the explanation of Daniel 8:14, but was a literal fulfillment when Antiochus Epiphanes came in the temple and offered porks or how to say, this unclean animal on the altar. And they said this was the fulfillment of this prophecy. That was the pollution of the temple. That was the pollution of the altar. And then this produced also the rebellion of the Maccabea afterward. So this is one explanation. It's a wrong explanation. But why is a wrong explanation? Because this principle of the spirit of prophecy, hermeneutical, is not considered. That you need to put all the pieces of the same message together. Therefore, the Bible needs to be considered in a whole, all completely information together, in the same point that we see here. And then we come to the right conclusion. If we isolated the elements, then we can come to all ideas that we can imagine, that can come in our mind, because it's possible. But the system of the inspiration is the combination of messages, the explanation of these messages, but not one line after the other line. That can be even in another book. This can be written after 300 years, after 500 years, after 1,000, after 2,000 years. And that is the case. So these elements you need to consider. It's extremely important. The addition to it and the comprehension of it. Let us consider another element in early writings that say is related with the first vision. And this is how she reacted more or less a week after her first vision. The Lord messenger received the command, make known to others what I have revealed to you. So when the prophet received the communication of God, is only the beginning of the communication in human level. Because here we are in divine level. Our first step that we have considered here is a divine level. This first one. Because the human being is a passive element. It's only a receiver of the message. Don't have influence about the message. Cannot manipulate the message. Only God give it to the person. So we are in the divine level. In the moment that the person have received it and received the command to give to others, in this moment we are in the human level. But this don't mean that this human level is completely independent in the transmission of the message. The Lord said, you need to say what I have revealed to you. And we have seen that even the words, the expressions, and the moment to give the message was provided by the Lord. So in both cases, in the divine level and the human level, where human is passive. This is in the first one. In the second one, the human is active. But in both cases, the spirit of prophecy is working. This can be in an oral transmission, in personal letters, in articles, and in books. And this is the diversity in the principle of the communication. Let us consider how function this orally communication. Mrs. White received, or Sister White received instructions and information for many persons. So we can divide it, first of all, in four main groups of information in the level of oral communication that Sister White received. She received to private persons. So we are in the oral communication. She received for private persons. He received for institutions. He received for groups of individuals. She received for the church, and he received also for the world. So very often the majority of them are combined. She can receive somebody only private communication about one specific case, about one person, or couple, or three or four, or I repeat, a unique person, that are in a specific church. So in this case, these two are combined. It's to private person, but in a specific local church, for example. This can be to a private person, for example, the leader of a department. For example, she gave messages to Kellogg in person. That was an individual communication, but was related with an institution, was with the sanatorium. So you find again this other combination, private people with institutions. And related with the church, you can find that she gives this message to a specific local group or church or field, but can be applied also to the completely church, or in other cases, not. And we will see in the selection of the information that was included when the first testimonies for the church was printed and published, a selection was done between the private communications, also communications to individual persons, to group of individuals, to church, and she selected and said, this we cannot use because don't have a general application. It's only for this particular case. And the message was inspired. The message was from the Lord, but for this only a specific case that cannot be generalized. So we will come to this point. So let us read how this goes. This process of oral communication happened also in different ways at the same time. Beside these 5 main entities or groups of people that receive it. In different cases, God sent her to a place. So the Lord said, you need to go there and you need to give the message. So the, the active decision was given from God to the person. In other cases, churches invited Sister White for something specifically, for example, for meetings, for conferences, and in this place then, the Lord gave to her messages. So she didn't take an active decision, but was a passive one. Because this happened through invitation, for example. But in any way, God gave the communication to the person. So generally was an active and a passive decision in the process of communicating the message. Let us read one testimony now. Testimonies for the Church, Volume 5, page 678. When I am speaking to the people, I say much that I have not premeditated. The Spirit of the Lord frequently comes upon me. I seem to be carried out of and away from myself. The life and character of different persons are clearly presented before my mind. I see their errors and dangers and feel compelled to speak of what is thus brought before me. So, she received specific information about private elements of the life of this person. Errors, mistakes, or maybe danger situation where the person can be. And she don't have the initial purpose to communicate the things as she have communicated, but the Lord have given to her in this way, and she needed to do also in this same way. Let us consider that beside these oral options that we have considered, these 5 ones, we have the personal letters. So she presented very often oral sermons, oral communications that were transcribed after and become also a written information. But then beside the oral communication, she sent personal letters. So only a part of the messages that she received was able to communicate orally, especially because of the distance. So these personal letters included messages that the Lord had given to her. She wrote them by hand, and her secretary used it to make many copies, but we will see how this process came afterwards. Let us consider, first of all, this process of communication by letters. Especially when was a problem or was a sin that was revealed to her, that she needed to speak to the person and say, you have done this and this sin. And that was revealed to me. So please change your life, otherwise your salvation is in danger. So if she didn't have a personal relation or a friendship with this person, then generally in different occasions she used somebody that she knew that was a good friend of this other person to give the letter, to send to this person the letter, to a third person, in order that through this other intermediator, the message arrived, and also a good result came of this letter. Let us read it. Manuscript 71 from 1903. Sometimes when I receive a testimony for someone who is in danger, who is being deceived by the enemy, I am instructed that I am not to place it in his hands. So God himself give her this counsel, but to give it to someone else to read to him. Because being deceived by the insinuations of Satan, he will read the testimony in the light of his own desires, and to him its meaning will be perverted. So in order to remain with the original idea of the message, the Lord told her to do so, to give to another person. This other person will be to go to this person and read it to the person. Because generally when we have done a mistake and we are under the influence or a bad spirit, if somebody came to us directly and say, this what you have done is wrong, please change. We can react in different ways, and one of the options is to reject. Yeah, this is not your matter. Yeah? I am free, I do whatever I want, and please let me in peace. This is a wrong reaction, but this can happen, unfortunately, happen too often. So, and then you are not more able to speak with the person because the person closed completely the communication with you because you say this and this was wrong. And the person is not ready to repent or to change. But in order to achieve success, what the Lord have said to her, don't send the letter to him. Don't send to him. Send to a friend of him. And then this friend will come and say, I have something for you. Are you ready that I read it to you something? It's a special letter for you. Let us pray and let us read it. Do you agree with this? And the person, if he's a friend, will say, yes, sure, what is the problem? And then the person will read to the other person this letter. So we see here again that this principle that we have considered in the case of Moses. Do you remember? Moses was the prophet, and God gave the message to Moses. Moses gave to Aaron, but Aaron was the one giving to the Pharaoh. And we have considered the Bible text that say that Aaron was the prophet of Moses. Do you remember this? Why? Because he was the one transferring the message, giving not to him, but to Moses. And in this case, he was an intermediator. So we see here that in different occasions, also the Lord used another second person that don't receive the spirit of prophecy, but is an intermediator giving the original message that the prophet received. And again, we find in the case here of Sister White that especially with letters happen this way of transferring. So other persons were included to transferring to the final person also the message. Were other cases of these written letters that Sister White have a personal relationship, and these persons ask her to write down what she originally said to them orally. And this is another process. Let us consider how it's presented. How Brother White wrote down in the Review and Herald, March the 3rd, 1868, about Sister White. We wish to say to those friends who have requested Miss White to write out personal testimonies that in this branch of her labor she has about 2 months' work on hand. On our Eastern tour, she improved all her spare time in writing such testimonies. She even wrote many of them in meeting while others were preaching and speaking. So we see here how the message was transformed in method, not in content. What does this mean? In different occasions, Sister White communicated oral revelations to a person that she knew and say, the Lord have shown me this and this and this. For example, have given information to her own husband and say, it's not good that you are going to work to build a train. It's not good that you are doing this. And he answered to her, but we don't have money. Yeah, the Lord will provide, but we need to do this magazine. And how the Present Truth appeared, the first magazine. And he went anyway to work in the train and become sick. And she told him, the Lord had shown me that this is not your work. Your work is to print the Present Truth. That this first magazine came up and we distributed and sent to all the believers. And the money will come. So that was an oral communication given to her own husband. And after, that's become also a written testimony. So they are optional ways how the Lord acts. A oral communication to the prophet, a oral communication from the prophet to the person. This is one way. But this way can be even added to it. That the oral communication given by the Lord to the prophetess become a written testimony, a written message also at the same time. And this is what we find here, and Brother White summarized in this article that he wrote, and say that a lot of people asked for it. And he said at least she have 2 months' work to do all this. All the oral communications that she have given, the people wanted to have in written. And this is the first time that became the word testimony. The testimonies came when originally was an oral testimony that became a written. And then came the word testimony. And this article in the Review and Herald help us to understand a lot of it. Because they say, in our Eastern tour, she improved all her spare time in writing such testimonies. And one big percentage of the written testimonies that we have today were originally oral transmission of messages. So we have considered oral, personal letters, how personal letters and oral testimonies become written testimonies, and now articles and books. In Testimonies for the Church, Volume 5, page 67 says, I do not write one article in the paper expressing merely my own ideas. They are what God has opened before me in vision, the precious rays of light shining from the throne. So many aspects of the truth that Sister White received in vision were presented to the church or to the general public, to the world. And because they were short visions, especially about doctrinal subjects, administrative issues in the church, were written in the form of articles originally. And that was included in the newspapers of the church at this time. So we see already 3 main sources of how we have the books now. We have considered 3 already. The original oral communication become written, and also personal letters become also part of the testimonies. Can be originally a letter sent to a third person or direct to the person, or can be a oral message given originally that become a written testimony. But we have also articles that become books through the compilation of the different articles that presented visions of Sister White. Who can give me one example that you know about one book of Sister White that first was article and after became a book? Also articles, pamphlets, and then a book.
Sanctified Life.
Sanctified Life. This is a typical example of it. That was not a book originally as such, that Sister White write down and began, okay, the Lord say we will write this book, and the title will be Sanctified Life. No, that was not the case. These were different visions, write as articles, and because the subject was the same, was put together. For example, another book is Early Writings. Yeah? Early Writings, the first section of the book is the first article published in the Present Truth. That was the first vision. So the first vision that became the first article in the first magazine became the first section of the book Early Writings. Okay? And before the book was a pamphlet, when the vision was amplified. Therefore, it's extremely important when you have a book of Sister White to know the sources and the original content of the book. Was this letters, articles, pamphlets, or sections of little booklets that appear and after become a bigger book? This is extremely important. This is the first element. The second element is how the information that is compiled is done. Because very often when you read the introduction, you find we have put together according to the subject in the chronological order. Okay, when you go to Advent Home, for example, you have a chapter about marriage and divorce. And this chapter, if you connect it with the introduction of the book, we will study this point. Then they write to you from the White Estate that all the sources are put it in the right way, was considered in the chronological and the proper historical context. Okay, we believe this. No problem about this. When you go to this specific subject from the marriage and divorce, or also to Christmas, yeah, to different elements that are in this book, then the first element that you find is that it's not in chronological order. And you can see this only when you go through this chapter. The different information that is included is partially considered. The original source is also perverted, and the completely compilation together with the different paragraphs give a completely perverted idea about how it was originally like this. So this is a book. So, and we will study these cases point by point. We will study about the vegetarianism, about the remarriage, because they are specific articles in the books of Sister White that brought a lot of confusion in our church because of this, because the people have the book and say, this is Sister White. Yeah, and it's there, the name. Yeah, okay. But they not consider the origin, the sources that are used, and the way how this is put together. And we will consider all this. So, the articles and books, they are other options. Let us consider even other testimonies. Letter 71, 1903 say, the articles that are printed in our papers are soon forgotten by the readers. They must be brought together, reprinted in book form, and placed before believers and unbelievers. So the idea that the articles that were prepared for the Review and Herald, okay, they couldn't repeat it. So you prepare a magazine, the people read one time, and then it's done. You cannot, in the next magazine, put the same articles. The people will don't buy the magazine, right? So she said, were so important information there that was a pity that this appeared only one time, the people read it one time, and then it's done. They forget about it. Then she received the instruction from the Lord that these articles that were visions needed to be put together according to subjects and become a book. So we see here a step by step how this happened. So when we imagine different steps in the process, we see here the orally communication that in different cases become a written communication. That this written communication can be a letter, can be an article, this can become a book, and even a completely set of books according to volumes. So we see here that the spirit of prophecy, that is a revelation of God himself, is not limited. It's always going higher and higher and higher in the process of communicate. So this originally orally communication that become written communication through letters, through articles, that become a book, and after become also a set of books, different volumes from the same, is how the process began to grow in our contemporary times. Let us consider other elements also. Everything that has been given to ministers, to men in responsible positions, to teachers, to managers, to the different conferences, is to be repeated and repeated. We must work earnestly to bring this instruction before the people. So again, we see here, she said, messages to ministers, to men in responsible positions, to teachers, to managers, to different conferences. All this thing was not given with the purpose to say one time and it's done. This needs to be repeated and repeated and repeated, and then put together and books appear. So when we see, for example, two ministers, we have today the different books, Gospel Workers, for example. That was not our original book that the Lord said to Sister Ellen G. White, sit down and write for me, Gospel Workers. No. This is also a book that is compiled. And they put together all the information appearing in articles, in sermons, in pamphlets about gospel workers. And then the book appeared. The book, tell me another book for ministers. It's very well known, besides Gospel Workers. Yes, exactly. Testimonies to ministers. Yeah? So it's so clear, the title. Which is the origin of this title, Testimonies? Excuse me? This can be oral, this can be letters, this can be articles. Yeah? So these were original information directed to ministers of the church. Especially in this book, you find many elements related with the evolution, the progression of the organization and the administration in the church, in this book. So that was put together. In this case, to teachers. Which books do you have that you know? Exactly. Then you have also the education, the fundamentals of Christian education. You have different kinds of books. And all these books came in this same process. Was not a book originally that was writing the education. No, were articles, were testimonies, were visions about the specific subjects that after was put together. We will study how this was put together. We are only considering now how the books came to us. So we need to avoid the thought that when we receive a book and the name is Sister White, that was written as we have in our hand. We cannot consider the book from the first page until the last page as was written originally, because it's not the case. It's not the case. Therefore, we need to consider section by section. For example, this, one of the last books is the Last Events. Yeah, the Last Events. I don't know exactly how is the title in English. Yeah, it's like this, The Last Events, yeah. So this is a compilation, a modern compilation, okay? Because we have compilations that were done during the time of Sister White, and we have compilations after 1915, after her death. And this is another element that we need to consider. The compilation done before and after her death, when we have a book in our hands. So when you go to this book, and you go through, especially in the section of the last intent of Satan to deceive the people, that he will try to be like Christ and try to convince the people that Christ come and he is the one. And the section also with the latter rain and with the plagues is presented in such a way that many people came to the conclusion that, for example, the plagues are symbolic. Are symbolic, they are not literal. People that don't understand the moment and the relation between, for example, latter rain and Sunday law, and the sealing period, beginning and end, related also with the time of the end. So we need to be careful. We need to be wise enough that when we have a book in our hands, first we investigated how this book came to life, how this book came to existence, which is the content, how the content is put together, and which is the purpose of the book. This is very, very important. So, let us consider now a book or a section of a book that I will recommend it to you. It's very important that you read it. This is Select Messages, Book 3. The section 3 also, the preparation of all Ellen G. White books. This section gives you part of the information that is here and even enlarge more. But this will help you to have a clear understanding of the context, because are people that take one sentence. For example, when you go to the article, the Church of God is not Babylon. And if somebody say that the Church of God is Babylon, is fallen. Okay? So, when our ministers from the Reform go to a Seventh-day Advent church and presented the people the message, the first element that an Advent minister use is this chapter. And say, you know, these people came to you and say that the Seventh-day Adventist is Babylon. And here is a testimony that say that those that say that the Church of God, the people of God, is Babylon, they are against the people of God. And then the people are confused, because they say, how is that possible? Because you cannot say, okay, this article is not from Sister White, this is correct. This is not a problem. But when and why this article was given, because it was a rebellion, that was Stanton. This is another subject. So when you look to this article as it is, and you take the book, and you see it, then you say, okay, the church can never fall. So Seventh-day Adventist Church is the church of God until the end. How is in this article? So these people that create another organization, no matter why, they don't have right of existence, because this article say that the Seventh-day, and it's literally written, the Seventh-day Adventist Church is the church of God and will be until the end. They say, what is this International Missionary Society? They don't have right of existence. Here is the testimony of Sister White given in vision. And then the people are done, finished completely. And why this happened? Ignorance. We need to know the context of this article. I was in a meeting with an Advent minister, and Brother Escobar instructed me and said, the first thing that he will bring is this point. And that was exactly like this. And now the explanation was ready. Yeah, sure, this article existed. That was given in which year? This year. To whom was giving this message? To this. Why? And this was done. No problem. When you can explain the context. Because that was an article originally. And the book is a compilation. And when you put the article in the historical setting, in the historical context, and in the original purpose of it, it's applicable until now, but not in this way. And then the people understand. But first we need to know how the testimonies came to us. And this is one of the reasons why we have this study. Because we need to be able to understand, not to accept things only because it's given to us like this. We need to think what is given to us according to the light of God. So please read this, this section, the section 3 of Select Messages, volume 3. And now your homework will be to describe 3 biblical examples for each of the exposed ways of communication. Okay, which were these? What we have considered. Do you remember? Okay. Yes. Okay. So do you have this in the Bible? Yes, all of them, without exceptions. So give me example of oral communication that originally was not only oral.
We direct oral communication from God to the prophet?
Yes, and that after become written. For example. Excuse me? Yes, Exodus 3, okay? That was the description in this chapter when God called Moses. Nobody was there, no other human being beside Moses. So the Lord called him from the burning bush. That was an oral communication. All the chapter completely, that was the conversation between God and Moses. God called him, told him what to do. Moses presented excuses. No, I cannot do because of this. And then the Lord answered. And they say, if they say me, who sent you? You need to say like this. Okay, but I cannot speak the language. Okay, no matter. We will do like this. For every excuse was an answer. And Moses continued to present excuse until the Lord says, stop. No more. You are going to go, and this is final. So that was an interview, a conversation between both of them. Because at the end, Moses interviewed God all the time and said, why I need to be like this? Why I need to go there? Why I need to say this? And the Lord always answered, why? Which is the reason for it? So that was originally a oral communication with one specific person, Moses himself. But then this became a written report. Because no other person was there. The Lord said to Moses, you need to write down this. For his own shame. Because all the excuses, that was not nice from Moses. But in any way, he needed to write down everything that happened this day. So that was one case, from oral to written communication. And then, about the other things, letters, for example. Yes, this is correct. Paul wrote to Philemon, yes. And the subject was clear, was Onésimo, the problem, yeah, and all these things that happened. So this is a letter, a personal communication to a specific person. You can give also examples to completely churches, and then you have 1 Corinthians, 2 Corinthians, okay? 1 Thessalonians, 2 Thessalonians. So we have letters to a specific person. We have Titus, we have Timothy, okay? But we have also letters to a specific group of peoples, yeah, or completely churches. So you have examples, and then you need to mention biblical examples from Old and the New Testament about these different examples that we have presented. Do you have questions about this section? Yes, brother.
You just saying that we need two examples
Yeah.
One from the Old.
For each.
Yes.
No, you can choose from Old or New Testament. Can be all three from the New, or two from the Old and one from the New, no matter.
Yeah.
This is not important, but at least three for every one of each. Can be for Old or the New, yes. Correct.
What are those? Oral, personal letter,
And articles and books.
Yes.
I was just going to ask about the describe. So is it kind of like an essay format, or?
Yes.
Yeah.
You need to describe.
Yeah.
It's not only a list, yeah? You need to describe the way how this happened. For example, in the case that we have mentioned for Moses, you need to explain. Don't write to me Exodus 3, from verse 1 to so-and-so, oral communication. Yeah, finish. Next. Yeah. So you need to say why is a oral communication. You need to explain. Before Moses was able to write down, first this communication happened. And after, this became a book. Okay? And you have a lot of examples. Yeah? You have specific examples often also in Moses. We have studied, when we have studied the Old Testament, the first time when God said to Moses, write a book. Do you remember when? When the Amalekites fight against Israel in the desert and attack them from behind. Then the Lord said to Moses, write in the book of the words of the Lord as a testimony that the Amalekites have done this to the people of God. And this is the first time that the Lord said, write in a book. You cannot use this example. It needs to be another one. But you have a lot. It's a lot. Jeremiah, the same. Yeah. The Lord gave the oral communication and after became a scroll. And needed to be repeated, because when the king destroyed the scroll, what the Lord say? You need to write it again. No, no more. So better not to speak about us. And even the Lord say more things were added to this second scroll that was not in the first scroll, that was destroyed. So there are a lot of examples. Yeah? This is only some. They are hundreds, because all the scriptures, the Holy Scriptures, came to us through this way. Yeah? This is a reality. Okay, any other questions about this? Okay, then I have questions. So let us review a little bit and then we finish. Hermano Iván, usted puede cortar hasta ahora la lección.